structure of a DC motor, a very basic DC motor, would be a rectangular coil which should be mounted on some sort of an axle. Axle is something about which the coil is going to be able to rotate freely. So the rectangular coil is mounted on an axle so that it allows the possibility for the coil to rotate. And it's mounted on an axle right between the poles of two permanent magnets, north and south pole. And the purpose of a DC motor is what? It is to produce mechanical motion, mechanical kinetic energy when you provide electrical energy to that. You have so many applications of motors around you, like blow dryer, like a drill machine, like a motor inside the fan. All of these motors are doing what? The electrical current moves into the motor, and because of that electric current flow, the motor starts rotating. So you provide electrical energy to it, and that converts into mechanical kinetic energy. So DC motor, if I said that you have a rectangular coil mounted on an axle placed between the poles of the permanent magnet, then that should be connected to power supply as well. So there would be a battery or a power supply with which it is being connected. So it's connected to a power supply with the help of these split ring commutators. These are semicircular rings. These are half rings which are rotating, and they're connected to power supply through carbon brushes. Carbon brushes are used here to provide soft electrical contact to minimize the amount of resistance and heat produced. But these half rings would be rotating, and as they would be rotating, they would be changing their positions, but carbon brushes would remain at their place. So split ring would rotate, and there would be a time when this ring and this ring would become in the vertical position, make no contact with carbon brush, and then it will rotate further, which will cause both the split rings to switch or swap contacts with the carbon brushes. And we will analyze what happens with that. But somehow at this particular point, you have split rings, which are half semicircular rings, and these split rings are connected through carbon brushes to the power supply. So that is the basic structure of a DC motor. Now, when you switch the motor on, you must be having an electrical switch connected over here, and with the help of that electrical switch, if you switch the motor on, the current would start flowing through the coil. So if you look at the path of the current flow, it's going to flow through like this, move into the conductor A, move out of the conductor B, goes to the other, with the help of the other split ring and carbon brush, it goes to the other end of the power supply. That is how it completes its path. But as current flows and it completes its path, you can analyze that there would be force experienced by both the conductor A and conductor B. That is because of the interaction of two magnetic fields. One magnetic field is produced by these north and south pole, and the other magnetic field is around these coils. So as these two magnetic fields will interact, there will be force on a current carrying conductor. And you can calculate the force. You have done the formula for the force, which is F equals BIL. And you can also judge the direction of that force. And you can judge the direction of that force with the help of the Fleming's left-hand rule, where index finger points towards the magnetic field, the second finger points towards the current. So if I'm doing it for A, it should be into the plane, and then the force acts downwards, right? So you can judge the direction of force on conductor A. And since B has the direction of current flowing in the opposite direction, so the direction of force would be opposite as well. This is an advantage. The force in conductor A is down, and the force in conductor B is up. It forms a pair of parallel, equal, and opposite forces, which is called couple of forces. And they produce rotation in the same direction. If this is the axle about which the coil is going to rotate, so this is producing an anti-clockwise rotation, and this is also producing an anti-clockwise rotation. So apparently, two forces seem to be acting in the opposite directions, but they are actually producing rotation in the same direction. So the conductor or the coil of wire is going to start rotating. As the conductor or the coil of wire is going to start rotating, it will make a turn, and after a quarter turn, the conductor is going to become vertical. The gaps between the split rings are deliberately made such big size so that when it becomes exactly vertical, there is no contact of the carbon brushes with the split rings, and hence no current would flow. And as no current would flow, there would be no force. There is going to be no force on conductor A and B, but they would not become static or they wouldn't stop moving. That's because there would still be some inertia of these conductors which will drag them to the opposite side. So as B was rotating anti-clockwise, it would continue to rotate anti-clockwise, and A would continue to rotate anti-clockwise as well, despite experiencing no force. The reason being the inertia of the coil. So as they continue to rotate, they would switch the positions. Conductor A will come into the position of B, and conductor B will come in the position of A. And the structure actually supports this particular change of position. Now, hypothetically, let's talk about if conductor A was experiencing force downward. And if it had rotated halfway and it had gone to the other side, and if it would have continued to experience force downwards, then it would not be able to rotate continuously in the anti-clockwise direction. You see, A experiencing force downwards, rotating anti-clockwise. But when A goes to this side becomes A, and if A was still experiencing force downwards, so it would not be rotating anti-clockwise, it would be rotating clockwise. So A rotating anti-clockwise and then rotating clockwise would not cause a complete continuous rotation. And which is why you use the split ring coming. The whole structure is to make sure that when conductor A moves from left-hand side to the right-hand side, it also switches contact with the battery. And since it switches contact with the battery of the power supply, the direction of current in conductor A would reverse. If you look at the first diagram, conductor A has current flowing inwards, but if you look at the third diagram, the conductor A has current flowing outwards. The direction of current of the conductor would be reversing, and hence the direction of force on conductor A would be reversing as well. So previously experiencing a force downwards, conductor A would now experience a force upwards. The direction of current reverses. The direction of force reverses along with the change of position, and that all serves as an advantage that it still produces the same direction of rotation. So if you look at conductor A in first diagram, that is rotating anti-clockwise. If you look at conductor A in the third diagram, that still is rotating anti-clockwise. And hence, a continuous synchronized rotation would be observed. And then obviously it'll start repeating itself. It again would go into a vertical position. Again, the gaps would get aligned, and again, the current stops flowing, but it doesn't stop due to inertia, and it'll continue to rotate, and it'll come back to position A, and it'll keep on repeating this again and again, and a continuous rotational motor would be achieved this way. Okay, so now guys, what's going to happen is that, well, we've talked about that. We just need to do some mathematical formulas associated with them. So if supposedly I say that the width of the coil is W and the length of the coil is L, so I can find out, we've already said that the forces on the two conductors are actually forming a couple of force. It's a concept you did in AS physics. A couple of force is a pair of parallel, equal, and opposite force which act in opposite directions. So it's actually forming a couple, and when it's forming a couple, there is a formula for couple that you did as well. That is force times perpendicular distance between the two forces. That's a direct one. You don't need to multiply that with the distance from the pivot. We can directly multiply force with the distance between the two forces, the perpendicular distance between the two forces. Then you will be able to get yourself the torque of the couple. The torque of the couple is going to be F times W. But this is not how it's going to be always. Like the conductor is going to rotate, and when conductor is going to rotate, it's going to make a certain angle with the horizontal. And if it makes a certain angle with the horizontal, the distance between the two forces would be W cos alpha. Whatever the angle the conductor makes with the horizontal or with the directional magnetic field lines, the torque would be F times W times cos alpha. And that's where we got this particular formula for that. Throughout, the torque of the couple acting on the two pair of conductors A and B would be equal to FW cos alpha. When it's horizontal, obviously angle would be 0. And when angle would be 0, the torque would be just F times W. And by the way, guys, so you know when the conductor is going to become exactly vertical, then the W cos 90 would become 0 and the torque would become equal to 0. So that will also give you an idea that even if there was current flowing in this particular situation, there would not have been any torque because the perpendicular distance, let's say there was current flowing and the forces were acting as a couple, but these forces would have zero perpendicular distance. So even current not flowing is not a disadvantage for us because had the current been flowing, it still would not have produced any torque. So, so we do understand that this is going to be F times W times cos alpha. And we recall the formula from the previous class of the force on a straight conductor in the magnetic field, which is F equals BIL. So I replaced F by BIL, and then I recall that L and W are length is the L is the length of the coil, W is the width of the coil. That gives you what? That gives you the area of the coil. You can identify L times W as A. And then you also should identify that generally when these motors are being made, they're not being made with only one conductor. They're made with many number of turns of the conductor. So as many turns there would be of the conductor here, that gets multiplied by your formula BIA cos alpha. So it becomes BINA cos alpha. So that is basically the formula for the torque, BINA cos alpha. That's an overall formula. B is the magnetic field strength, I is the current flowing, N is the number of turns in the coil, A is the area of conductor. And alpha is the angle between the plane of the coil and the direction of magnetic field. Now, if you look at the variation of torque, it's like a constant, B, I, N, and A, all of these are constant. The torque is basically a cos alpha function. So it should be forming something like this. This is how it should have been like. This is a cos function graph. But the overall result is not a cos function graph, it's a modulus cos function graph. And this modulus is being achieved by the split ring commutator. So you have to identify yourself that the direction of rotation never became negative. The direction of torque never became negative. The whole function of the split ring commutator was to make sure that it continues to rotate in the same direction. So if the torque is positive, it continues to stay positive or it continues to stay anti-clockwise throughout the motion. And that is being achieved by the split ring commutator. So if you have to draw a torque graph, you wouldn't continue this on the negative side. You would just make it still on the positive side.